For a long time, Edd China was the quiet genius behind the bench on Wheeler Dealers, the person who made fixes that seemed impossible look easy. Then, all of a sudden, he was gone. I'm sorry to say that it's true. Sorry, making Wheeler for 13 years, I'm going to leave the dealers now. Show. This is what happened in the narrative. After Edd left the TV, went into his workshop and started to develop something that no one saw coming. They unlocked Edd China's garage, and what they found within will leave you speechless. The truth is far stranger than stories. The sudden leave. In March 2017, Edd China startled fans of Wheeler Dealers by telling his leaving the long-running and a series of cars that people enjoy. For several years, the tall, kind mechanic had been the main part of the show, famous for his calm explanations and detailed dives fixing things that are broken. But after 13 years and hundreds of car changes, Edd made the choice to leave. And it wasn't since he wasn't interested in vehicles anymore. There were deeper motives, differences in creativity with the show going in a new path, and there was a disagreement regarding what Wheeler Dealers was becoming. The show was first. The UK series with a minimal budget had grown into a success around the world. It put Edd together with Mike Brewer, who is also a co-host, is in charge of the purchase and selling of second-hand cars, and Edd is in charge of the mechanical overhauls. What set Wheeler Dealers apart was Edd's in-depth workshop parts. People who watch witnessed the before and after. They learned the steps, the parts, the weird things, and the things you have to do to breathe give a used car a new lease on life. That honesty, that respect for the work became a key part of the show identity. But change was on the way. In Discovery Channel said in 2017 that making of Wheeler Dealers would move from the UK to the US under the direction of a new production business. With the transfer came a new way of making the show. Edd's leaving video says that got millions of views in just a few days. The producers wanted to cut back on the fewer of the in-depth parts and more of the workshop parts, fix film and make adjustments that are easier to follow to fit a faster pace and be tighter time to run. Edd didn't agree. In the video, he calmly explained why he thought that strong belief. He said the show would lower the educational value of this method. He said that the risk wasn't only about the format. It was also about its honesty. If people who watched it were no longer demonstrated the work in enough detail, the show would become more shallow, more for fun than for real record of car restoration. For that was a red line for Edd, and instead he walked away instead of compromising. News from in the business at the time said that tensions had been rising for a while now behind the scenes. The change in production, there was also a change in from mechanical detail to priority, a wide range of interests from UK roots to American polish. Edd, who had developed his on-screen transparency and hands-on as part of his persona help, didn't see himself fitting into that future. His leaving caught fans were surprised. People reacted strongly, and right away. People left a lot of comments on online communities. Some mad, some supportive, but many were just heartbroken. To Edd was the heart of the show for many longtime fans of the show. The calm power with which he took care of everything from seized bolts to full engine rebuilds had made an unusual type of TV repairman for him. Someone you thought you could learn from someone from. Mike Brewer also answered publicly, saying how devastated he was about Edd's decision and reiterating his own promise to keep the show going. But even though he had a new co-host, Ant Anstead, a former Formula One technician, Wheeler was definitely not a question. Dealers would be different if they moved forward. The chemistry between Mike and Edd had worked for years to develop it. It wasn't easy to change the dynamic. Made again. Edd, on the other hand, didn't lash out. He stayed out of the drama and didn't, instead of blaming, offering fans a calm and logical explanation. But the meaning was plain. The version of Wheeler Dealers that had made he was no longer a household name, place where he might do what he thought was right in. There were also personal effects. According to news reports and sites like The Sun and Metro, Edd and Mike got a lot of negative feedback from fans. Some of it was harsh, and some of it was wrong. Edd later admitted that his choice had made people feel really strongly, and even if he stood by his choice, but the fallout wasn't not hard. In later interviews, he said that the exit was sad but needed. Someone had crossed a border, and for who cared more about quality than anything else, there was no going back. And then he vanished. For about a year following, Edd kept a low profile after leaving Wheeler Dealers. Profile. No new shows, no big announcements. Fans asked, what was he working on? Did he get burned out? Was he done with TV for good? The solutions would come, but not yet. First, Edd China needed some time. It's time to think about it, reset it, and as we would later find out, make something fresh behind the doors of his own garage into the empty space. It was strange and not like them. Not being there. Edd had been a well-known figure for a long time. A well-known person in the car world, not merely through the show and through public activities, interviews, and going to car shows around the UK and beyond. So when the when updates stopped coming, people started to guess filled the hole. Had he stopped watching TV? For good? Was he tired? Was he doing things in secret? The questions kept coming, but answers stayed hard to find. We know this about this time, little but telling. Edd didn't go away, totally. He just pulled back inside. According to several allegations from within sources and interviews from later years, he had came back to his workshop, the same garage where many of his ideas came from older technologies, such as the motorized and office chair and a sofa that is legal on the street. But this time, there were no script, no outside help, and cameras rolling no deadlines, just tools, ideas, and time. People who knew Edd well talked about him during this time as recharging. After a long time experience filming tight schedules and working inside the limits of TV, he was suddenly free to move during production, at his own speed. And he did. He wasn't not working. Not at all. But his main point changed. Instead of making content, he was building again for the sake of building. This was a return to the first rules, messing around, and trying new things because he wanted to. He solved problems, not because he wanted to. One of the people who know him often talk about the same things. Him is that Edd never stopped thinking. He was still drawing, making prototypes, going back to old projects that were left behind. A few of his thoughts went back to before Wheeler Dealers, ideas that had never really worked the way a show is set up, or new ideas that required time and space to do it perfect. He now had both. A few unconfirmed at the time, reports said he was trying out an electric vehicle conversions. This wouldn't be surprising. Edd has always had an interest in sustainability and alternative powertrains. Some even suggested he was working on a way to retrofit classic cars with modern electric drivetrains in a way that preserved their character. But these were only whispers. No hard proof appeared throughout that year to confirm what was going behind those closed doors to the garage. What did leak out, though, was fan interest. There were a lot of threads on online forums, wondering where Edd had gone. YouTube people started leaving comments on old videos of Wheeler Dealers are full with memories and worry. Some admirers thought he had departed to the whole industry. Some people thought he was planning something major, but most just hoped he was doing all right mentally, in terms of health and creativity. That worry wasn't without reason. Leaving a big show, especially one that has shaped you, there are consequences that come with a career. Edd himself later said that the change had been hard and emotional. Even though he stayed calm in front of others' goodbye, he had just broken up with a consistent income, a worldwide platform, and a project he had worked on for years into. It's not a big jump to imagine that time needed time to think it all over. There is also the issue of burnout. Years of tight deadlines for manufacturing, pressure to delivering, and being watched by fans, producers, and executives can wear down even the strongest. According to some people who know a lot about the sector, Edd had been softly saying frustration in the months leading up to his leaving. The creative spark remains there, but the setting no longer supported it. So, the garage turned into a safe place. During this time, Edd also took time off from social media. His Twitter account stopped posting. The YouTube channel stayed quiet. For someone who is really close to DIY despite openness, the silence was nearly spooky. Sometimes, whispers would come up. Some fans with sharp eyes said they saw him at engineering shows in the area or going to classic vehicle meets without making a fuss. These sightings only made things worse. Guesswork. Was he undertaking market research? What kind of research? Getting people to work together, testing a new invention without anyone knowing? No, everyone knew for sure, but Edd wasn't telling. Still, the longer the stillness went on, the enigma grew bigger. What was going on in that garage? Was Edd just taking a well-deserved rest, or was he, as usual, turned around coming up with a plan to build something that would surprise everyone? As 2018 went on, people started to get excited. A few updates that were hard to understand began to show up. Short posts on blogs, mentions in interviews, small signs that something was about to happen. Edd wasn't gone. He was merely doing his job, in secret. And then, nearly exactly a new one came out a year after he left TV. YouTube showed a thumbnail. No hype campaign, no hoopla, just a video called Episode 1 of Garage Revival. The name spoke it all. But before that year of silence could lead to a return, there was a reason for the stillness. It wasn't an empty space. It was incubation. And what had been going on in the shadows of that garage was going to change all of it. The workshop comes to life. Edd China came back in May 2018, but not to TV. He came back by himself. Keywords using a YouTube channel, they made themselves the Edd China's Garage Revival series. Fans have been quiet for almost a year, not with advertising bluster or a bold new name, but with something more straightforward, cleaner, and clearly Edd. The idea was refreshingly down to earth. Look for folks who are working on restoring cars tasks and help them finish what they couldn't finish by themselves. Each Edd went home in this episode working with garages all throughout the UK, people who loved cars and had sat still for years. If it was because of time, money, or technical skill, these efforts had come to a halt and Edd was there to bring them back to life. But Garage Revival was more than simply vehicles. It was about humans. The show used into a deeper emotional thread, the frustration of dreams that aren't finished, the emotion behind each oily frame, and the feeling of relief when someone finally gets the help they need to go on. Edd wasn't just working on engines. He was getting things going again. The first show based on a classic VW Golf GTI left halfway through the rebuilding process. The owner had done everything he could do with the tools and knowledge they had welcomed Edd into the mess of his half-done project. What came next was an honest and methodical look at the state of the automobile. Edd didn't play for the camera. He didn't make things easier for the sake of drama. He lay down on the floor, got his hands dirty, and told what needed to be done and why. That tone became Garage's signature sound. Come back. It was definitely real. No voiceovers, no pre-recorded music, just a car, a camera, and Edd doing what he does best, always done well. Making things clear, mechanical issues in simple English. If he showed how to fix a seized brake line, to let it go. If a gearbox wasn't working right simultaneously, he talked over the inside how it all made sense. For fans who had missed his deep dives on this, was like a wheeler dealer's coming home. The quality of the output was on purpose humble. Edd was no longer supported by a TV studio. There were no executive producers in charge of the format, no strict deadlines for broadcasting. He was in charge of writing, presenting, even helping to direct the edit. It was real though, and that's the point. The answer was right away. The first episode got hundreds of thousands of views in days. The comments section was like a reunion, fans welcoming him back, thanking him for keeping his word style, and saying how glad he was that his passion hadn't died down because of the fallout in the industry. Some people even stated the show was better than Dealers of Wheeler. It was more about me, easier to relate to, more focused on the why behind each repair. In the background, the start of Garage Revival was also a test of litmus. According to the industry, people who knew Edd well said he was unsure about if they should go back into the public eye at all. The series on YouTube let him try things out without committing himself for a long time. It gave him the freedom to try new things and start over a direct route to his audience without interference. It also signaled a change in how he interacted with the people in his community. For fans could leave comments for the first time directly on his work and get answers. They could suggest cars to feature, methods to clarify, or even point out things he might have missed. More episodes will come out over the next few months. Came next, a victory here, a Land Rover that was left alone. Every story slowly and without any shortcuts. These weren't showy changes that were set to music videos. These were real fixes that work in the real world, repairs made up on the spot, bolts that won't budge, unplanned problems. The type of labor that anyone a DIY mechanic knows this all too well. And that's what brought Garage Revival to life. Ring true, it wasn't about being perfect. It was about not giving up. Edd wasn't teaching people how to make display cars. He was teaching them how to obtain that one. Done right, the type you want to do for months now. By doing this, he got back the spirit of hands-on. Anything that teaches people about driving it has been slowly disappearing from the most popular car magazines. It's important to note that Garage Revival didn't become a huge franchise. It didn't have to. It was a private thing. project, a means for Edd to get back in touch with what he liked while still being free. And for many who had been following him for years, it was an obvious message. He hadn't gone away. He'd simply made a turn. By the conclusion of 2018, Edd has shown that he could make his own path. He didn't require a lot of money, studio to stay up to date. All he required a camera and a project that needed to be finished and a purpose to get to work. The workshop lights came back on with Garage Revival. Came back on, and this time they were everything is his, behind the doors. So, after a while, there came a private tour. Put together, they opened Edd China's garage, and what they found inside will make you speechless. Hidden behind through doors with no signs on them and past a messy driveway and shelves stacked with pieces that have been forgotten, is the workshop where for years Edd has been quietly creating a world that is all his own. And once they were in, it's hard to know where to start looking. The Notorious sits against one wall, a sofa that is legal on the street, made from armchairs, suspension, together from armchairs, suspension, parts, and just being strange. There is a motorized bathroom nearby, a completely working toilet on wheels, with plumbing and a steering wheel column. These weren't merely tricks for a laugh, they were legitimate and signed up. Cars that used to drive around the streets as proofs of what can happen when where engineering and imagination meet. But in the middle of all the fun and wonder, one discovery stood out, and not in a good way. People who were there during a rare private tour of the garage, which is hidden. There was a somewhat hidden area in the back that was dark, dismantled prototype that was once meant for a public show that was quite evident gone wrong. It was called a self-steering bar stool, a test in small personal mobility using stabilization with gyroscopes. But the project had been stopped in what can only be called a situation of trouble. Wires hung down from burned control boxes. Marks from burning made the plywood underneath black. The witness said the lithium battery, it was evident that the housing had been damaged by heat. Incident and burned remains were still on the equipment around it. No people said they were hurt, but the proof suggested that Edd had just barely averted a very bad fire at the workplace. For a maker, it was recognized for its control and accuracy, a unique look at the hazards of always new ideas. As one business as an insider put it, that monster looked like it tried to roast itself alive, and even this is awful, even as a little it fits though. The garage isn't just a place to play, it's a lab. Edd doesn't sort through his thoughts, he follows them. Some become amazing things that can be driven on the road. Some things, like the self-steering bar stool, fall spectacularly into the testing phase. But every bolt, every drawing, every prototype smeared in soot tells the same tale. A brain that won't cease making things. This is Edd's side, that the public doesn't often see. In the end, he is a lone inventor who is surrounded by experiments that make it hard to tell the difference between brilliance and insanity. And if any of those experiments arrive with a burn mark or two, it just shows how far he's willing to go to make something that no one else wouldn't even try. Reinventing. After a little but real success of Garage Revival, Edd China had to deal with a really important point. He had shown that he could do it by himself, that his name, passion, and reputation were enough to put on a performance without the help of a big network. But for Edd, starting over wasn't just about going back to the screen. It was about changing his role in the realm of cars completely. The time spent away from regular TV had given him a chance to think about not just his profession, but also what was most important to him as a creator and an engineer. A lot of people still knew him. Edd was the guy from Wheeler Dealers, therefore he had quietly spent years pondering about old-fashioned combustion engines. Long before the rise in electric vehicles mainstream, he'd been messing around with ideas for long-lasting transportation, hybrid and alternative powertrains retrofits. Now that he had full control of the platform, he could finally take that under his thinking about the public. Edd started a new series in April 2021, Edd China's Workshop Diaries on YouTube. The format was easy, but the idea was larger. Garage Revival is different from focused on helping others finish their stalled initiatives. Workshop Diaries drew viewers right into Edd's own his garage, where he keeps his equipment and other things, projects, and models. It was a get back to the kind of in-depth material that taught him how to be a household name, but now with a forward-thinking edge. The show gave weekly episodes, most of which last 20 to 40 minutes, with everything from minutes, including everything from engine breakdowns to electric cars analysis of parts. But what made it the tone was what stood out. Workshop Diaries didn't want to be a sleek, high-octane TV alternative. It was close, honest, and on purpose paced. Edd talked to the camera like an old buddy, walking viewers through each step of a project, breaking it down into not just what he was doing, but also why. The first project was to change an antique classic Mini that runs on electricity. It was a test of the idea. Edd wanted to illustrate that electric conversions didn't have to be soulless. That person, charm, and classic looks could survive and even do well when combined with drivetrains of today. People who watched got to see the engineering work that needs to be done. Changing the motor mounts and choosing the battery, wiring up control devices and packs. Nothing was not clear, and the message was clear. This wasn't simply fixing cars. It was engineering that was good for the environment with real-world effects. As the series went on, Workshop Diaries changed what they were about. Some episodes drew on traditional work to restore and fix up suspension systems, fixing problems gears, or figuring out what's wrong with the fuel system problems. Others looked into more abstract ideas. Subjects such as making a lightweight body panels made from old things or trying out regenerative braking systems on older platforms. There were even times when Edd tested out homemade tools or had extensive Q&A sessions based on queries sent in by viewers. No sponsors decided what the content will be. No advertisers set the course. It was curiosity and skill without stopping. In a lot of respects, the series was Edd's most emphatic expression of goal yet. A mix of teaching, new ideas, and making things easier to get to. He was questioning what people usually think, motivating both amateurs and professionals similar to look at their garages not just storage areas, but labs. The answer to Workshop Diaries was very positive. People wrote a lot of comments, from fans old and young, applauding the depth of the explanation, the clarity of the wisdom, and the feeling of peace the series gave. It wasn't showy, nevertheless, it was quite pleasant. People who watched thought they were learning from someone who concerned about the future of getting around itself. There was also an unsaid emotional thread running through the series. You could feel watching episode after episode that Edd had taken time to get better when he left Wheeler Dealers. There was no anger, just a calm assurance that he had discovered his voice again. The series was good for my mental health, a gradual, steady return of a man in his own way to the world. By the time Workshop Diaries was in its second year, it has developed beyond a small group channel on YouTube. It became a center of engineers that think the same way, those that like to tinker, old cars, and people who think ahead. Edd sometimes brought in guests, some of whom were former acquaintances or co-workers from the business, but the objective never changed. It was still a one-man show about being honest, engineering, careful thinking, and work that matters. And that leads naturally to the greater picture. The legacy of Edd China. Edd's trip shows something that is often ignored in the fast-paced world of entertainment in the media and cars. Being true to your beliefs. Edd may have stayed with Wheeler Dealers. He could have taken the checks and changed to a quicker, flashier version of himself. But he didn't. He left from a proven recipe since it no longer in line with what he really believes, because the process is just as important as the product. That the how is just as vital as the what. That choice, it was a bold move, but it gained him a lot of respect outside of the car enthusiast group. He became a sign of honesty in business where compromise is common default. His dedication to openness, quality, and education didn't go away when the cameras stopped working. If anything, it got stronger. Edd still makes Workshop Today Diary, still learning about new things, continually looking at new technologies, yet addressing questions that most shows never ask. And for each teenager taking up a wrench for the first time, every technician in the garage having trouble with a stubborn bolt, engineer wondering if it's possible to bring ancient machines into a cleaner, he's there, calm, for a greener future, patient and always wanting to know more. His mentorship on a large scale is becoming online, a reminder that being good at something isn't dead, that engineering is about solving problems, solutions, being patient, and having a goal. Do you agree? Tell us in the comments.